Hi, I'm Carol Wilson of Light Reading. I'm here in London with Ian.
Hi, Carol.
And you're actually, didn't have to travel as far as I did to be here.
Yes, yeah. I'm not suffering from the jet lag like you, I suspect.
Very true, very true. So we've had a pretty exciting morning so far. I have a few thoughts about takeaways, but maybe you have your own. One of the things that seems to be popping up over and over again, is the folks I talk to, is that there are a number of companies that are moving very fast to operationalize NFV and SDN because for business reasons, because they're losing money and they realize they're losing service revenues and they realize they have to move fast.
Yep.
That seems to be a real theme here. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think we've heard a lot more about the business challenges today than you sometimes do. I think at SDN and NFV conferences. A lot of talk about actually making money out of these technologies and whether that's possible and the challenges it presents for the vendors kind of in this space. I mean, quite a lot of audience participation as well, I think, with some vendors speaking out and saying, well, this is difficult and they need help from the operator community. And I know people like Klaus Martini at Deutsche Telekom, who's very sort of heavily involved in this idea of setting up an automation group. Is particularly concerned about that, about how we kind of come up with new business models that vendors can kind of use to go forwards, as well as kind of deal with the technical complexities and the cultural challenges.
Yeah, that seemed to be also pop up. That whole theme seemed to pop up in the discussion around open source.
Yeah.
It's like, great, you want to do open source, that's fine, but make it possible for vendors to make money distributing open source, and not look at open source as somehow a way you're going to avoid paying vendors.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
and yeah. I mean, the open source issue always seems to come up at these events as well, doesn't it? But I mean, do you think there's been any sort of fresh thoughts on that today? People have been quite outspoken about it, haven't they?
I think so. Although I thought it was interesting when James Crawshaw said that he sees the fact that there's overlapping open source initiatives as a positive because it means they're going to compete to survive, and he thinks that could be good, make them move faster.
Yeah.
But I do think there's increasing skepticism around some of the open source groups, particularly in the OSS and orchestration space.
Yeah.
That whether or not they're going to produce anything in the near term in time to fix the business problems that companies are having.
And it's a big time, I guess, for ONAP as well, which is one of the most prominent of those,
Yeah.
because its first release is obviously coming out later
Right.
this month. But I know there's been lots of talk about the possibility of getting these sort of common information models between that and the OSM, and people aren't very positive about the
I have to say, I was surprised. I'm surprised. Usually
Yeah.
these OSS events, common information models are held up as sort of the shiny orb that everybody wants to grab.
Yeah.
And here, starting with James Crawshaw's comments and then going on right through the panels, everybody seemed to be saying, yeah, that'd be great, but we're never going to agree on this. We're never going to agree.
Yeah.
And I won't use the very crude comment that was made this morning about the likelihood of getting a common information model, but it seems like people are just saying that's not the plan going forward. We need to use layers of abstraction and other approaches, other types of APIs to enable us to maintain our own information models internally, but communicate amongst each other.
Yeah, and BT was talking about that a bit this morning, wasn't it, as well, in their keynote presentation. But were you surprised at some of the comments there? Because he was fairly critical of some of the movements on the vendor side, wasn't he?
He was, but he also introduced a concept that I've since heard mentioned twice, and I had not been familiar with it before, the notion of annotated Yang.
Yes, yeah.
And so, do you understand that?
It seems like a sort of customized version of Yang, but I mean, it's the thing I took away from it was the kind of need for a lot of cultural change really within BT to kind of overcome these problems of vendor diversity, and that they're having to work on training up engineers to get up to speed on these data modeling languages. And he said, some of them managed to make that transition and some of them don't, but it's been really hard to do. They've tried to do it softly, and now they've sort of had to crunch the organization, I think is what he said.
Right.
So,
but I think this all speaks to a couple of basic things. One, everybody knows they have to move faster, and they're trying to move faster. And to some extent, in order to do that, they're abandoning some of the original goals. Like I said, common information models don't seem to be the big thing they were.
Yeah.
So it seems to me, to some extent, the speed of movement has become more important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's an urgency to act, isn't there? And the problems they're facing, the sort of OTT challenges they talk about regularly aren't about to go away.
No.
So if they want that agility and if they want the benefits that it brings, then they have to kind of start moving now, which is, I guess, why you hear more and more talk about standardization, and with some degree of frustration, I think, that that process moves so slowly because of the way it's been set up.
And nobody wants to wait.
Nobody wants to wait. They just want to kind of get on with it.
Okay. I think that's the theme for today. Get on with it.
Thanks, Carol.